Are you thinking of packing your bags and moving to the Lone Star State?
Whoa, hold your horses, man.
Today we're going to be exploring why Texas might not be all that it's cracked up to be. So get ready as we uncover 5 compelling reasons to think twice before making that big move to Texas. So let's do this. So one thing that might make you think twice before relocating here to Texas would have to be the extreme weather conditions. Now, Texas is probably best known for its hot summers. We're talking over 100-degree weather, and that's not just temperature-wise, that's heat index-wise. You see, here in Texas, sometimes the heat index can be hotter than the actual temperature. So it may actually be 80 degrees, but it might feel like 100 degrees outside. Not only that, but if you go far enough south down in Texas, that humid heat closer to the Gulf Coast can be really unbearable. Something else to look forward to here in Texas has to probably be the tornadoes. As you know, part of Texas is located in Tornado Alley. So Tornado Alley itself, some people are claiming that it's actually shifted a little bit further east. I'm guessing maybe, maybe not, but here in North Texas, we do see quite a bit of tornadic activity, or even just really strong straight line winds that can be up to 60 to 70 miles per hour that could knock over your fence. Not to mention the hail that we have to deal with on a regular basis, causing our homeowners insurance to be just a little bit higher than other parts of Texas. And if you live closer to Houston, Corpus Christi, Galveston, anywhere along the Gulf Coast, expect hurricanes. It's just part of living in that area and living by the ocean. The other thing to think about weather-wise are flash floods. Now, flash floods occur when you have a pop-up random storm cloud. It floods a certain area and it's very difficult to drive. We're talking you don't want to drive through an area or through a flash flood area where a lot of those lower creek beds sometimes can creep up above the road. There are times during the summer as well to where we will have burn bans or we'll have water restrictions during drought times. Now, it's not perpetually a drought here in North Dallas. However, the western part of the state would probably be a little bit different. More of the desert climate or desert part of Texas is obviously going to have more stricter water restrictions in those areas, but that's not the entire state of Texas. Most of Texas, I would argue, is pretty green. So if the weather didn't scare you off, reason number 2 would have to be the cost of living. Now you're thinking, Rebecca, cost of living? I thought it was cheap to live in Texas. It's cheap to live in some parts of Texas. However, around most metropolitan areas and most big cities, it's actually rather expensive, sometimes even more expensive than other parts of the nation. So let's take a quick peek at the numbers, shall we? So if you're going off of averages and you're looking at numbers here in Texas, that's probably the wrong approach. If you live very far out in the country, you're gonna probably expect lower cost of living, i.e. lower housing costs, lower property taxes, those types of things. Now, the closer you get to these larger cities and to these larger metropolitan areas, affordability kind of goes out the window. So in this article by Bankrate, it says the median sale price of a home in the state increased 0.6% on the first quarter of 2023 compared with the same time a year ago, putting the price at $326,800. Despite the year-over-year increase, that's more than $50,000 cheaper than the nationwide median. However, I will say, if you're trying to find a home here in the North Dallas area for $326,800, that's going to be a little bit difficult. And you're probably going to be looking at smaller houses. We're talking probably houses under $200,000, possibly. Now, if you're on the outskirts or live further out in the country, $326,000 can get you a lot more for your money. Rental cost as well is going to vary based on where you're located in Texas. Let's say you're trying to find a house in DFW that's renting for $2,000 a month. They're very few. We're talking about a house, not a half duplex, not a condo, not a townhouse. go look and see. It's very difficult to find a house $2,000 a month or less unless it's really, really small and it doesn't have at least 3 beds and 2 baths. Utilities wise, as far as cost of living, it states here that the electric bill in the state is about $155 per month. That's on average. I would say that's a little bit high, to be honest, and it also depends on how old the house is, you know, how well is it sealed, how old is the heating and air conditioning unit. There are lots of factors per house, but $155 a month for electricity, I would say it just depends, but I would say that's a pretty decent average for an average sized house here in Texas. Obviously, it's going to be a lot less if you are in a smaller house than a maybe 2,000 or 3,000 square foot home for just your electric bill. And usually a majority of that electric bill is how often you're running your heating and air conditioning unit here. So you have to have a car if you're going to live here in Texas. So that also means that you're going to have car insurance as well. Also, there are toll roads here in Texas that will gladly deduct $40 from your bank account, probably at least twice a month if you're not even going on a regular basis out there and driving on toll roads. So keep that in mind. That's another added expense. So $5,477 annually on transportation. I don't know if they're including gas and car insurance, if that's kind of all together. I know for us, 2 cars was about $200 a month. It's kind of what we're spending right now. Gas is actually the cheapest compared to other states, so we're a little bit less there. It's right around $3 a gallon right here for regular unleaded. Food prices, the data shows that a single adult spends about $3,926 a year on food, which amounts to $327 a month. That's kind of a lot for one adult. I would say that our family of 8 spends probably about $600 for the month. $600 to $800 a month on food, groceries. That's just groceries. We're not talking about eating out. So that'll kind of give you an idea as far as cost. And that's probably lower than some other places in the nation. The taxes are a lot higher. So Texas is the 6th most expensive of the 50 states. This is where the average gets you in trouble. It says the average tax rate in Texas property tax rate is 1.6%, which in my opinion is incorrect. I would say that most of the major metropolitan areas are going to have a tax rate closer to 2.5%. And in some cases, you could see as high as 3%. Now, the 3% is a little bit on the rare side, but I would say that most property taxes, that 2.5% includes the city tax, the county tax, the school tax, and if you're close enough to a community college, it'll have a tax for the local community college. Now, however, if you are located outside of town and far enough outside of town, you may not get taxed from the city, but you'll still have county taxes and you'll also have your school taxes as well. There are also nice tax exemptions for those that are 65 and older. You do get a pretty hefty tax break, as well as those who are disabled veterans. Disabled veterans can get a 100% tax write-off completely to where they're not paying any property taxes. And that's usually based off their level of disability, which is provided by the VA. Oh, and the last tax benefit that you can get if you're here in Texas is what we call a homestead exemption. It's not a whole lot, but I know that they're working on legislation to hopefully increase that amount. So that way you get a little bit better break on your taxes if you are a homeowner. Now, this homestead exemption does not apply for rental properties. It is only for properties that you are currently living in. Now, the Texas unemployment rate for the whole state on average was 4%. Now, the national rate was at 3.4%. So I would say in general, if we're looking at averages again, Those cities that are further away from major metropolitan areas probably are skewing some of the numbers. So just kind of keep that in mind. All right, so lastly, I want to talk a little bit about healthcare cost. Healthcare is also another area where it is more expensive here in Texas than other states. So make sure that you do your local research because it'll depend on that. Also, you want to make sure that you are looking at all of your options when it comes to healthcare, whether that's being partially provided by your employer or you're independently trying to look for other means of healthcare and healthcare coverage. So as the population starts to grow in some of these major metropolitan areas like Dallas, like Houston, like Austin, we start to see home values become impacted to where even the local Texans, the local people that have grown up in Dallas, they can no longer afford to live in these areas because we have so much of a population growth from those that are moving from California, from Chicago, from all these places that have higher incomes compared to here in Texas. And the problem with this is that it is kicking out older residents, people that have been here forever, maybe even people that grew up here that are no longer able to afford a property in their local market. The third reason that you might not want to move here to Texas would have to be the schools and some of the educational challenges that we've seen here in the state. So in a recent study that they did, Texas ranks 40th out of all the 50 states, so there's only 10 states under us. The study was based on the education levels. Now, Texas is a large area. There's a lot of people in these major metropolitan cities, and they're gonna have probably more money thrown at their schools, and therefore they could have more educational opportunities in those major metro areas. However, if you live 2 hours away from Dallas, from Fort Worth, from Houston, from Austin, if you live too far away and you're in more of a rural setting, usually those school ratings and rankings are gonna go down because there's not a whole lot of money in those areas, in those cities that's going towards education. I've seen a lot of teachers get paid less, not as much incentive to teach in some of these smaller, more rural areas or more rural cities. Where I grew up, it was 2 cities that combined to make 1 high school, 1 middle school, and 1 elementary school. And that was just an hour away from Dallas. So if you think about the geography of Texas and where some of these cities are, you could have 4 or 5 different smaller cities kind of all clustering together to form 1 independent school district. That's also going to have an educational impact on those students that are in more of the rural areas versus city or even inner city, which is another demographic or thing to think about when you talk about the education system. So the 4th reason why you might not want to relocate here to Texas could be that we don't really have great public transportation. Now, obviously, if you're out in the middle of nowhere, a bus might be the best thing, you could hitch a ride on. However, if you're in a big major metropolitan area, there are some public transit rail systems that are available in some of those areas like Dallas and Houston and San Antonio. However, these bus systems and these rail systems are very limited to a lot of the suburbs and also the rural areas. If you're gonna live here in Texas, you're gonna need a car. You don't have to get a big master mega truck, but you're gonna need a vehicle for sure to get you from point A to point B, to your job, to your kid's school, wherever it's gonna take you, you're gonna need some sort of vehicle. And as a result of needing a vehicle, obviously you're gonna be experiencing traffic, whether that be an area of growth that only has a 2-lane road in and out of the city, or it could just be that you're in rush hour traffic and you're headed into downtown. Congratulations. And as a result of the traffic and the time, there are also many toll roads that are in some of these areas, especially the major metropolitan areas. You're gonna find toll roads taking you all the way into downtown and taking your money. So just be aware that there are toll roads, especially in a lot of the major metropolitan cities in Texas. So the fifth reason why that you might not want to relocate here to Texas could be some of our environmental concerns. For example, we do have droughts from time to time, and that can really affect the water supplies of certain cities, especially some of the more rural areas. Some of the other concerns here in Texas from an environmental standpoint could be that you just have really bad allergies to cedar, and there's a lot of cedar here in Texas. Or you react differently to some of the higher levels of mold or mildew count just kind of floating or roaming around in the air. Now, obviously some of that is seasonal. However, you know, if you have really bad allergies and you relocate here, don't anticipate those allergies to get any better just by relocating here to Texas. Another environmental concern for those that are relocating here could be some of the wildlife here that you're not used to, i.e. our state bird, which is the mosquito. If you do not like mosquitoes, then you probably don't need to move here to Texas, especially in more of the swampy or areas that are by like larger ponds or lakes. Definitely big hubs for mosquitoes. Flies can also get really bad here during the summer. Cockroaches in some locations can be really bad. Spiders are also a thing here in Texas. I would say particularly if you live out in the country, you might see a lot of garden spiders. They look really, really scary, but they're pretty harmless. We do have some more poisonous spiders here in Texas, whether that be the brown recluse or the black widow. And you might also find the occasional small little brown scorpion just kind of waddling along your hardwood floor in your living room. So just kind of be aware, especially newly built homes, you have a tendency to see more bugs kind of come in. The cicadas are also a thing here in Texas. They're just loud, they're obnoxious, they shed their little exoskeleton, and they're a little bit gross. The June bugs that come in May and sometimes in June are also kind of a nuisance if you're out and about, especially in the evening time. They could kind of fly up and hit you in the face. So tarantulas are a thing here in Texas. They are pretty skittish and harmless, but don't adopt one. I've heard also that deer and wild pigs can kind of be a nuisance sometimes, especially if you're out in more of a rural area. Also here in Texas, expect to find little clusters of foxes or coyotes. They will definitely try to go after your little dogs in the evening, so make sure you put those little dogs in a safe place overnight. Something else that you need to be aware of, whether you're in the city or in the country, are bobcats. I've seen bobcats climb over fences and attack small dogs, or I guess if you have chickens, they could eat some of your chickens. And the critter you dreaded the most, probably here in Texas, would be the snakes. There are garden snakes, those are pretty typical. I've seen rat snakes, I've seen water moccasins in the water, just kind of floating around in lakes or rivers. It's also very common to see rattlesnakes, mainly in more of the desert areas. You'll see more rattlesnakes, but if you're in a greener part of Texas, not as likely, because that's not really the habitat for rattlesnakes. And the last thing environmentally that you kind of need to think about if you're going to relocate here to Texas is that we don't really have as much public land available just to go out and wander around in a river or in a lake. You could end up wandering around someone else's property. There are plenty of state parks here in Texas that you can go and walk and explore. And there are spots around most of the lakes to where you can actually camp and explore nature. So there are many challenges when you're trying to relocate to Texas, let alone just another state entirely. So be sure to take the bad as well as the good when you're considering all your options. Make sure you're doing your research and your due diligence on your end, as well as visiting Texas and visiting the area to check out and explore some of the places and areas that you're most interested in relocating. Having lived here my entire life and being a native Texan, if you have any questions for me, my contact information's in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next video. Oh, and before you go, make sure you watch this video right here.